Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, early in the testimony today, you painted a pretty stark picture of the threat we're facing from China, the things we need to do to get there. In your exchange with Ranking Member Rogers, it sounds like, your assessment, this current year budget doesn't cut it, and if extrapolated over a number of years, we'd have a hard time meeting that threat that we're facing. Is that a fair assessment?
I think this is a critical decade for us to close gaps against China, or in those areas where we have overmatch, to create distance against China. And so I think that if we don't do it in this decade, I think we're fooling ourselves based on the momentum that it's going to happen in the future. That's why we need to get after it. And that's why we need to make these risk-informed decisions about modernization versus keeping legacy platforms.
All right, thanks. General, from the Marine Corps perspective, would you agree with that? Is this current year budget what you need? I know there are things on there that you want that we're not getting, but if this is extrapolated over a number of years, is that going to impact your ability to get to the core that you feel we need to face the China threat?
If our budgets don't even match inflation, then the risk is high, correct, that at some point in the future we're overmatched. And that's not what you want us to, that's not a place we want to be in.
Very good. Admiral, specifically on P-8s, the Neptunes, the risk-informed warfighting requirement was for 138. With the 9 Congress added last year, we're at 128, yet there's no funding for this year. Has the assessment changed, or is this an example of we don't have enough money to do the things we think we need to do?
Sir, I think the assessment has changed. We don't think we need as many as we initially estimated. So we've had some good runtime in the P-8. They're a heavily sought-after aircraft. We're using them in the Eastern Med. We're using them in the High North. We're using them in the Pacific with a great degree of effectiveness. So we know how to use the platform better than we did initially when we first procured it. And so it's led to a slight decrease in overall numbers.
Okay. General Berger had talked about the pilot shortage and some of the things the Marines are looking at. But Admiral, from your perspective, what are the things we're going to need to do? And as he had alluded to, and I've seen in my own experience, it's not just the pilot being produced right out of flight school. It's that second tour JO with a couple of cruises under their belt that's Strike League qualified. That doesn't happen overnight. We ran into that deficiency in the 90s with the T-notch, and by the late 90s, you can't produce them at the snap of a finger. What are we doing to ensure we don't get there?
I tell you, we're monitoring it really closely. And so in terms of incentives for those pilots, I'll just mention a couple. One of them is a career intermission break where they can go off and study if they need to, or they can take the time off to begin a family if they need to. We're trying to work with them on an individual basis so that we can retain them. At the same time, keep their skills proficient. There are also, as you would imagine, there are monetary considerations there. We do have some incentives that we have offered pilots. We've created a separate now track for a professional flight instructor, and so that avenue exists as well. And so what we're trying to do is in a competitive environment with respect to the commercial aviation sector, we are trying to remain competitive ourselves in terms of making naval aviation the best place to work.
I'm glad to hear that about the professional instructor. That was an idea kicked around a long time ago, and I knew a lot of people that would have loved to have stayed in the cockpit, didn't have aspirations for stars like you all.
Right.
That's great to hear. And finally, Mr. Harger, this is really more just editorial for me. This is my first pass through on the budget here. It's not from a bipartisan response you're hearing here today, it's not enough. You've got professionals who we've entrusted to come to you with the advice of what's needed to get the job done, but they're also military. And at the end of the day, they're going to snap to and salute and get the job done with what you give them, and it's not enough. In peacetime, that's going to lead to low morale, lack of readiness, and it's going to kill people. It's going to kill soldiers, sailors, and airmen. In a wartime footing, in the future that we're headed towards, it's our very national security at risk. We've got to do better. This is not going to be an acceptable posture going forward. And I yield back.
Thank you.